All right, I just wanted to show off my winter beard a bit, and actually, I'm just um, thankful to be back in civilization and all the conveniences of the grid, being plugged into the grid, and the the contrivances. Is that a word? I'm not used to using fancy words anymore. I don't read fancy books as much since I'm no longer in university. But I was just out in the woods, in the bush, as they say, in a hut, in a hermit hut, um, with a squirrel wanting to get rid of me. And I love how in the wilderness the other animals, they treat you as equals. So then I did some Tibetan throat singing that was very deep and immediately scared the squirrel away. Otherwise, it kept pestering me. It had moved into my hut and chewed out a perfect little house in a foam cushion in the wall. And I just got this book by another self-published author on Lulu, and I thought I ordered volume 1 is archived, so you can read that for free on the archive. And this author is a British musician. In the first book, he writes a lot about Andrea Puharich, and there was some new information in there, including he mentions testimony of one of the space kids, one of the psychic spy space kids that Andrea Puharich tested, and she gave a testimony about her experiences. I guess she was traumatized by it, and she has a website that I'll link. And this book is in small. You can see the font is small size because he's trying to save money, just like I did, because Lulu, they charge a lot for printing costs, and my book is now about the same size as this book. This is mine's like 300 pages, and this is like 325. And anyway, yeah, so I was cutting firewood for heat, and I had a little wood stove, and if you don't keep the little stove going, then you start getting cold and freezing, and you gotta stay in your sleeping bag, and you start meditating, stay warm, and the more you meditate, then you can connect back to the source of reality. And so all of our conveniences with a centralized distribution for food and heat and everything, it makes our lives more disconnected from the source of the reality, especially with sacred fire. The fire was sacred from our original human culture. The males all had to know how to start fire just using sticks and nothing else, nothing more than sticks. And if you couldn't do that, then you weren't a real male, a real man. And hardly anybody knows how to do that. I've never trained in how to start a fire just from sticks. I've seen videos on how to do it. Tom Brown Jr.'s son, he teaches how to do this, and I read Tom Brown Jr.'s books on survivalism, and he claims he was trained by an Apache elder. At any rate, it's easy to understand why people would want to choose to live in the conveniences of civilization, because it's very physically tiring and emotionally straining to constantly be doing menial labor, with your hands and your arms and your legs, and constantly, whether you're hunting or farming or cutting firewood or whatever, everything has to be done. Not that long ago, this was like listening just to my grandparents, my great uncle, and they lived in towns that still had traditional native cultures that were camped out around the towns, and of course my grandparents, and I had great grandparents living in dirt houses, and I was in a dirt house, a dirt hut, the past few days, just a frozen dirt floor. So that's how my great grandparents, they literally, that was their life, having to live that way, and try to improve upon it. But what we call progress has been at the expense of all the other living, all the the ecology of the planet, all the habitat for the squirrels or the everything else, all the So now in the past 40 years, we've killed off something like 70% of the wildlife on the planet and replaced it with livestock for farming or humans, and we think it's not a problem, but we're also mining the fresh water and using up our freshwater supplies, and then mining the phosphorus and using up the phosphorus supplies for farming. And of course, everybody knows about the oil and the wars fought for oil, and everything runs on oil and gasoline and diesel and all that, and coal, and overfishing the oceans, and all the plastic pollution and all the toxic waste and nuclear radiation, and it just goes on and on and on. And so when we enjoy the convenience, but the cost is like a credit card where the debt accumulates at an exponential interest rate financially, whereas nature takes time to recover. So nature works as a cycle that has to restore itself. So there's no real progress in nature. It's what they call the Red Queen. And the Red Queen is a biological concept in evolution. And so E.O. Wilson, the famous biologist, he first documented and wrote about the mass extinction of species of life on Earth in his 1992 book that I studied while I studied in Costa Rica. And over 50% of biodiversity is in the rainforest, in the equatorial rainforest. But E.O. Wilson also documented how humans were one of the few species to practice what he calls eusociality. And eusociality means the cooperation between multiple generations to build a nest and protect the nest. And this is what makes humans a successful species, is based on that cooperation. What E.O. Wilson called the social conquest of Earth. And there's only about a half a dozen species that do this besides humans. And so E.O. Wilson argued that it's only through increased cooperation that we will be able to restore habitat for not just biological diversity of life on Earth, but also the necessary ecological services to store carbon and to emit oxygen and to clean the water and supply fresh water through the hydrological cycle with rain, and to keep the soil fertile to grow food. But you might say E.O. Wilson was a bit naive about just how bad our condition is, how seriously wrong, how real evil is in terms of a force of destruction, how the conveniences of civilization are actually based on what Marx called primitive accumulation. In other words, the periphery of the empire is based on slavery and clear cutting and strip mining, and even within the empire, 40% of the workforce doesn't make enough to support their family. And so now we have to turn back to an intergenerational sharing an intergenerational cooperative society. We have to turn away from the greed is good individualism lie that this sort of competition of the survival of the fittest of the individual is actually the lie that will destroy modern civilization, and instead we have to realize that Lynn Margulis was correct. The biologist Lynn Margulis argued that symbiosis as cooperation is actually the foundation of biology, just as the mitochondria in our cells that's powered by the oxygen to create the power and the energy. That mitochondria originated as the oldest life on Earth, the algae, and this is why I eat spirulina. Spirulina is one of the oldest life forms on Earth, and the algae stores the carbon, the CO2. So the more algae you grow, the more carbon you store. And of course, the modern civilization has been based on trying to decrease the entropy of matter. And so we've created all this precise engineering for construction and machinery and all sorts of technology, but all that attempt to be precise in information to decrease the so-called randomness of matter actually is increasing the entropy of gravity on Earth. This is what Roger Penrose figured out, that gravity originates from frequency, and the frequency has a secret, a time-reversed signal that's called negative entropy or negentropy. And this is the gravitational potential that powers the sun. And Penrose figured out it is protoconsciousness that unifies relativity with quantum physics. And so it is protoconsciousness that is the truth of reality, that's non-local and is a eternal flowing of the future, guiding matter and creating new matter at a faster than light reality. It's not even a speed, because it's before space-time. It's a pure time process of proto-consciousness. It's what Louis de Broglie called the law of phase harmony. So the phase is superluminal, and it's inherently a harmonious, and we connect to it through music, because music is the only cultural trait that all humans have in common. but it's a simple music that is found in the non-Western tuning, and it's as close as the octave. That's pretty close. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 5. That's a perfect fifth. There, that's the octave. Okay, I almost have to go falsetto. Every culture uses the perfect fifth, the octave, and then the perfect fourth is the inversion of the octave as an undertone, as a perfect fifth as the undertone. And if you do not try to contain those frequencies into a symmetric spatial matter, then you realize the truth of matter is an eternal superluminal resonance. And there's actually a researcher at the University of Arizona, Pierre Damer, and I've cited his research on my blog, and he created this. He's worked with a research team. His collaborators named Runge, R-U-N-G, and they have this concept they call 5 bits, and essentially it's the same concept of having 2 frequencies that have a non-commutative phase. And so one of the frequencies is the non-local, like guiding wave. And so by inverting the frequencies, you can create a superposition that is also non-local and therefore superluminal, and you're able to then do this through ultrasound, because the ultrasound has a mechanical transduction along with the electrical piezoelectric transduction. But they're using complex 3-dimensional waves that have the non-commutative or asymmetrical time frequency, just as is found in a block sphere in quantum physics. And this is a very simple concept. It's as simple as the fact that 2/3 is C to F as an undertone, and 3/2 is C to G as an overtone, and they're both the perfect fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. So that's what Alain Connes calls 2-3 infinity. So Pierre Damer and his research group at University of Arizona are applying that concept to create room temperature superluminal phase signals as quantum computing, for quantum computing. Now, whether they're successful or not, the fact is that Stuart Hameroff's research group, working with Roger Penrose, have also just documented that microtubules also are superluminal super radiance of these acoustic phonons between the tubulins as a metamaterial. And Pierre Damer's research group has also studied microtubules as metamaterials. So they understand the same concept. And it's as simple as you want to make it, or as complicated as you want to make it. But this concept, it challenges the mainstream science that has so far all been based on trying to decrease the entropy of matter by increasing the entropy of gravity, and thereby speeding up time through technology. So we are running out of space on Earth as time speeds up. And so the only way around this is to reverse the entropy of gravity. And this is to realize that matter is not inherently random, but rather matter is inherently guided by a negative frequency and time reverse signal. That virtual photons are not just a mathematical infinity that has to be renormalized in a relativistic quantum field theory, but rather that virtual photons can be absorbed and turned into increased photon energy that can then be stored in violation of the conservation of momentum. And so this represents a new form of energy, but also a means of time reverse signals by utilizing superluminal, superconducting, room temperature, noncommutative phase phonons, acoustic phonons. And this is the truth of reality. It's the foundation of reality that we already exist within, and that we will all return to when our spirit leaves our body. And so whether we get there through technology or we get there through meditation, that's the path. The future and the past, they eventually meet back together again, and each time it's always different. It's always fresh and always new through this cycle of transformation, with the future and the past overlapping. And so that's why when we go into deep dreamless sleep at night, we wake up feeling great bliss. We experienced great bliss that we can logically infer that we experienced great bliss, even though there was the real source of who we are had no experience of space or time or any kind of emotion. There was still this harmonizing resonance or musical action of the future and the past overlapping. And so when we do that as a conscious process and not just a automatic process of sleep, then we can consciously realizing that being awake is also a type of automatic perception, like sleep. Sleep is automatic. And then we can begin to access the wormhole of the future and the past by realizing that matter is actually made of light, and all matter originates from light, as that's also has information, consciousness, protoconsciousness. So the light has a hidden source that is due to the virtual photons. Light has gravitational mass to it because light has kinetic energy. So the matter, the 1/2 spin of matter is actually due to the virtual photons. This is what creates the magnetic field that then stores the information. And it does so in the future, with the future and the past overlapping, so we can access the future, and then we can also change the past. And so the gravitational mass of light is because the mass originates as frequency because of the kinetic energy of light is from the momentum, the quantum momentum as frequency. And this is explained in Gerard de Hoof's article called Light is Heavy. And so Gerard de Hoof, he also has a Nobel Prize like Roger Penrose. And so Nobel physicist Gerard de Hoof argues that black holes exist on the microscopic level, and they are the truth of matter, that they are eternal black holes as a fifth dimensional black hole. And this is what Paul S. Wesson also figured out as an astrophysics professor, that the truth of the universe is a 5-dimensional black hole, so that everything is happening at the speed of light, instantly in contact with each other at the speed of light. So because the future and the past are overlapping as a wormhole, as a black hole wormhole on the just in the realm of time as the 5th dimension, what Roger Penrose calls fundamental time. And so this is where the soul exists. It's the matter gets turned into light, but the light still has the virtual photon gravitational mass that's magnetic and stores information as the future and the past eternally overlapping, and so it's ever new and eternally radiating light that then creates new matter. And so this causes a difference in time between internal and external time in space. And the difference in time is based on a difference in frequency, a difference in internal and external frequency. And this difference is the difference between relativity and quantum physics. And so, as time slows down externally, that's relativity. As the internal matter goes towards the speed of light, as accessed through meditation. And so the quantum and the relativity are unified through the protoconsciousness, as what Roger Penrose calls the gravitational equivalence principle. So there is no sense of gravity when you're in free fall due to the equivalence principle. But since gravity originates from frequency based on matter originally being photons, so this is called the de Broglie-Einstein relation that Penrose talks about. So the energy is defined by the average energy of light as frequency equaling the speed of light squared over the velocity of matter. And so the more the matter is turned into light by turning itself around through consciousness as light, then the consciousness resonates with the proto-consciousness. That's a superluminal, super radiating phonon. It's an acoustic ether. That's a phase. It's a superluminal phase that's inherently time and frequency. It's so it cannot be seen, but it's a guiding harmony that can be logically inferred and listened to. And it's what Roger Penrose calls negative resonance. Recently, there was a professor interviewing Stuart Hameroff. This professor is a neuroscientist, and Hameroff was talking about negative resonance, and the professor, he couldn't understand negative resonance because he says, if we think slowly, how can that be negative resonance with the microtubule frequencies in the ultrasound? And he didn't understand that the time reverse signal is actually an undertone. It's a non-commutative undertone, just as the perfect fifth is, or the perfect fourth is an undertone as the perfect fifth. So it's when you double the undertone as 2/3, then it gets doubled to 4/3. But in order to do that, you have to change the one. You have to change the root tonic. And so the source of the sound is never a materialistic medium. It's no longer some kind of medium as an ether, but rather the source of sound as a quantum acoustic phonon inherently is not an external measurement. So as Dr. Von Shiva says, growth happens from within. Or as the ancient Egyptians said, the cosmic mother will never be unveiled. Or as the Taoists said, the mysterious valley of the spirit is the emptiness. So this is what was also called the Great Mother, or the cosmic womb of the universe. And this is true on a biological level as well as a metaphysical level. And this is why the truth is difficult for our species to accept, because as mammals we rely on DNA we rely on what's called biological dimorphism, or the difference between the male and the female. But this is just to provide some DNA variety, whereas most of nature relies on parthenogenesis, which is the reproduction by itself through the female, whether it's through spores or cell division. And the physical level has the complementary opposites, but the male eventually has a zero rest mass as matter, because the male is the principle of consciousness as light, the number one, but that number eventually has to go back to zero, as with a zero rest mass as light, because light has a zero rest mass. But in fact, light still has a gravitational mass, and it's that gravitational mass that is the absolute void that eternally radiates light, what was called a paron in ancient pre-Socratic Pythagorean philosophy, the cosmic mother that eternally radiates light by breathing the universe. So the breathing creates the fire as the light. This is the cosmic womb tomb, or what in India was called Kali, as the cosmic goddess of Kala, time, of creation and destruction, that can never be seen. So this is what the male has to accept. The male has to accept that as light, he returns to the eternal cosmic womb tomb that cannot be seen, but can be listened to. And so just as primates originated out of the rainforest, where listening was our primary perception, so too is time our primary reality, and not visual external measurement. And therefore seeing is not believing. And so this is the great irony of our modern civilization, because it's all based on external measurements and seeing as believing. And that explains all the paradoxes and all the disharmony, the pain and the suffering, and the illusion of progress. And this is the great secret that our ancestors knew about, and required all males to learn through a special male training that originated from the females. And the radical anthropologists, the research group of Camilla Power and Chris Knight, and Jerome Lewis, and who else? Megan Beasley, and I can't remember everybody else's names, but they document, they have lectures on the male, and I read Chris Knight's book. I discovered it in a used bookstore about probably like 20 years ago. And his book's called Blood Relations. And I recommend that book. It's a fascinating read. But there are too many books to read, and the best thing we can do is to do the meditation training, and then to be able to pass on that virtual photon energy that's inherently a harmonizing energy. And this energy is passed on as it's stored in our bodies as increased light energy. And we can store it up through meditation, and after it's stored up to a certain level, then we're able to pass it on to other people and learn how to convert other types of energy like food and air and Earth's energy and the sun's energy and water, to convert that into a higher frequency of light that then is able to absorb the virtual photons that have harmonious healing inherently due to the mathematics, the noncommutative mathematics. And so when we think of the future of the universe, as Roger Penrose says, eventually all the black holes will collapse together, and it will take like 10 to 100 years or something like that. I don't know. It's a Google years or something. It's unimaginably long time. But then eventually all the black holes will evaporate back into virtual photons. And that will be the creation of the next universe. And when that happens, there will be no scale of size, no size at all. The truth of the universe will be as immense as it is. It will be as if it never had any size, and it was just what he calls fundamental time. And so this truth of fundamental time, it already exists inside of us right now. And so the way to access it is through the complementary opposites that flow back into the fundamental time as the emptiness. And this is based on the sun and the moon and the breathing, the diet, the emotional energy, the posture, the mind, the visualization, the focus, the sound, and the level of power is based on the level of emptiness. So the more you go into the emptiness based on listening, the less there is of you, and the more there is of this harmonious energy. And this is the secret, the true secret of human eusociality, that the intergenerational success of humans actually relies on certain people being time travelers and beyond all generations of not just humans, but all life on Earth. And eventually the matter as life will develop again in a different form, because reality itself is alive, inherently alive. We've been taught to think that only certain kinds of life are self-aware, but quantum physics has now proven that even the smallest particle, the electron, is guided by the future, by a non-local, a field that is pure time, the future and the past overlapping. And this is the source of spin, 1/2 spin, and of the what they call negaparticles. Negaparticles is the gravitational mass of the photon that the electron then emits. And so the electron is actually composed of photons, that the 1/2 spin of the electron is due to the gravitational mass of the photons. And this is the secret that John G. Williamson discusses, building on Louis de Broglie and Gerard de Hooft and Martin van der Mark. So the future of society, of technology, is still stuck in the wrong idea of what matter is. And our pursuit of progress is accelerating the destruction of life on Earth. Yet, matter, even at the level of the electron, inherently has protoconsciousness. And so even though light has gravitational mass that has information, as a gravitational potential, as the time reverse signal and negative frequency from quantum physics. And this is our soul, the information of our soul. And the spiritual masters on earth can actually heal our souls through the emptiness, through the virtual photon ether, the formless awareness ether. They can actually heal the future of ourself as it overlaps with our past. So they can change our past in order to change our future. And by doing so, can then create new matter and restore our present. And that's the irony of the eternal present, is feeding off the future by healing the past. So the more you're able to travel into the future, the more you're able to heal your past and therefore maintain your presence. And that's the secret of reality. That's how it works. And if you keep storing that up, then you realize that space-time is a vortex, like a spiral, like a Coriolis effect that originates from this non-local future and past overlapping. So the more you store up the virtual photon energy, the more you have gravitational potential energy, which is the same as dark energy or anti-gravity. And eventually the body will actually levitate, and eventually you can even create another physical body in a different space-time. So every time you create another physical body, you're in a slightly different space-time. Externally, internally, you're in the eternal present, where everything is happening at the speed of light, with the light turned around to its non-local future and past overlapping. So this is the blue light of the soul that's seen internally, and then externally it creates gold. It's seen as gold. So this is a lot easier to talk about than it is to actually live out off of civilization in a cave somewhere meditating. So but I did study with somebody who actually did the cave meditation. So if you want to study with the real deal, you can take the classes from Chun-Yi Lin. He teaches through his healing clinic called Spring Forest Qigong. That's what his name translates as. Chun-Yi Lin means spring forest. And he did the cave meditation for 28 days non-stop with no sleep, just in the emptiness, meditating and traveling into the future to heal his past of his ancestors and the future of the spiritual masters and his future healing work in Minnesota. And so there you go. He says that was the greatest time of his life, and his goal is to return back to the cave and continue that meditation. And in the meantime, he keeps doing profound healing work that people have no idea how important it is. Way more important than any of us can even imagine.